I am Vitold, and now is the time to summarize all the pros and cons of a revised Yamaha Tenere 700 that, for example, received a new display. In 2023, I've had an opportunity to rent out and ride this motorcycle. I've also ridden all other mid-size adventure motorcycles that are on the market, and let me share with you what I feel is nice about this bike and where it may suck. There's also one significant deal breaker that I had a chance to find out once in my life that it actually is a deal breaker. It's also on this motorcycle, and it in fact now prevents me from riding motorcycles that are the same in this particular place. I'll let you know what it is. Now keep in mind that some of the points on my list are more and less subjective. We're all different, and if I like or dislike something, it doesn't mean that it may just not be the opposite for some of you guys. The thing is that I've been doing this for a pretty long time, and I have ridden with the purpose of reviewing all large and mid-size adventure motorcycles, so I've got a pretty much full perspective here, and I've got no incentive to paint the grass green or to bullshit you in any other way. So let's proceed first with what's cool about this Yamaha Tenere 700 in its base variant, so with standard suspension and fuel tank. The first pro is a surprising one, as it's a compliment to Tenere's handling. It's actually about low speed handling in this case, as at higher speed it's not as awesome, but below around 80 kilometers per hour it feels great. It feels eager to turn and to control, while at all speeds it feels very well balanced and neutral. This is really big, especially considering some of its competitors. This bike is really fun to ride and flick from one side to another at low speeds. Now the second point is that this whole off-road rally style may be appealing and tough. I personally also like that 4 LED front light that makes it look like a boss on the street. I get it, and I get that design can be an advantage here overall. Next one on my list is the exhaust sound, which is awesome with that 40 sound at the beginning. And when blipping the throttle to rev it, it is seriously cool and encouraging, for example, to me, which on top of that makes the bike appear as even more powerful than it actually is. The fourth pro, I can understand the idea of simplicity being gold. I don't agree exactly with it in this particular case, but thinking that the less there is to brake means that it won't break makes sense, especially if you're planning to travel to some remote place on a bike. I'll get back to it once we move to the list of cons in a moment, but I get it also. The fifth advantage is in the form of ground clearance, which is quite impressive here at 24 centimeters. Not bad for the segment and in general as well. Then in the sixth place, there's one that I like a lot, and I only found out once I sat on another bike that has it too. KTM 1290 Super Adventure R, which is that nice and stimulating position when sitting on the bike. The handlebar is not too narrow, it's not too wide, nor too high, nor too low. There's good visibility thanks to sitting high, a totally upright position, and the feeling of control that makes it really fun to jump on and ride the bike. It is quite rare in the segment. I really love this. I can almost feel as stimulated as on my electrically adjustable office chair from Power Seats. This one stimulates to work a lot actually. Yeah, it's very unique too, helpful especially if you're working from home. The last seventh pro of the Tenere 700 can be the image of a Japanese brand being quite reliable. Even if it's not reliable, the image still stays, so the whole point would remain valid actually. Now let's move to the stinky list of cons of this bike. I know there is a large group of hardcore fans consisting of basically owners of Tenere 700, that's understandable. I don't want to be mean, but if you're one of those, you may find it especially hard to swallow, so watch it at your own risk, definitely with the supervision of a calm person. Again, I do not own a motorcycle that's a competition to the Tenere. I really don't have any business in discouraging anyone from getting this bike, except if you want to save your life. Let's cut to the chase and start off with the first point on this ugly list, which is that you've got to push a Tenere to start leaning and turning at higher speeds, above 80 kilometers per hour, somewhere there. So what's an advantage is lower speeds. Beyond that point, 80 kilometers per hour, it becomes a disadvantage. It is a tall bike with a large front wheel, so I can understand it. I want you guys to know that for higher speed riding on a twisty road, for example, it won't be the most enjoyable bike out there. It's not terrible, it doesn't fight, but it's just slow to react. The second con is that the bike is noticeably top heavy and not really easy to move around when you want to push it from one place to another, despite it being a rather light motorcycle in the segment. It is a tall thing with a high center of gravity, so be careful, as I myself wouldn't feel that confident next to it because of that. This connects with the next potential disadvantage, which is that I feel it is actually unnecessarily tall in this case. It doesn't translate into its off-road capabilities or lower body comfort in terms of knee angle or even seat comfort, so it's just made tall to be tall. 87.5 centimeters of the seat is quite a lot, and with no adjustment, well, you gotta keep it in mind. The fourth con is that the suspension is harsh and extremely uncomfortable. This to me is really bad, in fact, and would take a lot of joy from riding every day. There are bikes that on paper and suspension wise are also way more capable in terms of off-roading, despite not looking as much like rally motorcycles. Suspension travel is not very impressive here, considering the way this bike looks and how tall it is. There are versions of this Tenere 700 with 2 centimeters more suspension travel and ground clearance, and also 1.5 centimeters more of seat height at 89 centimeters. Good luck. Moving to the fifth point, you've got to see this fuel tank cap that stays in your hand, and you've got to figure out what to do with it. To me, that is not understandable, and it just causes an unnecessary problem. Now, in the sixth, there are tubed tires that only hardcore off-roaders mostly will appreciate when they seriously bend the rim or puncture just the tire without damaging the tube inside of it. Otherwise, you need a specific set of tires for this motorcycle. You always have to make sure that when replacing the tire, you warn the service, the shop, that there are tubes inside. The seventh point is about that there is generally no tech on board except for ABS and LED front light. There's no quick shifter, for example, while others pretty much all can have it already. There's no traction control, which is a deal breaker for me, and for this particular reason, I wouldn't be able to ride this bike, which is also the title of my full review of this Yamaha Tenere 700. Safety matters on a motorcycle unless you've got really, for some reason, a death wish, or simply you ride off the roads only. But then even limited traction control would be a possible solution, as I don't believe that anyone would really buy a 200+ kilogram motorcycle instead of a 100 to 120 kilogram dirt bike or enduro motorcycle to ride off-road. I am aware that we may have a different perspective on this topic, and I may understand the lack of quick shifter, I may understand the lack of keyless ignition, riding modes, electrically adjustable windscreen or suspension, but traction control is a very basic thing right next to the ABS, and if someone doesn't want it to intrude, this is just a solution, the form of switching it off. But then getting back on a wet tarmac, if you can switch it back on, it can save your life and your bike's life, and it just prevents injuries. I've been there, so I'm speaking out of my personal experience. And now moving to the eighth point, there is a transmission that has a lovely habit of engaging the neutral when switching from the first to the second gear, but not when you want it. It's not the best execution, but at least, well, then finding that neutral is easy, even if you're not planning to. The ninth is rather weak performance comparing to some other mid-size adventure motorcycles. However, thanks to aggressive sound, you don't feel that it's actually that slow. But it's not within the top bikes here, definitely below average in the segment. And the last one, the 10th con, is that Tenere 700 is pretty expensive for what it offers. The price tag is not the highest, but it can be higher than some competitors that offer so much more and therefore more value for money simply. This makes the Tenere 700 appear as overpriced if you would like to get something more than just two wheels with an engine. Now take a look at the prices of Suzuki V-Strom 800D and Honda Transalp. It doesn't look so good for the Yamaha then, at least on my market. So this is how I see it in terms of pros and cons. To see my full review of this motorcycle, check the video linked in the description and find out what other things there are explained in detail in that video. Now subscribe for more analysis and breakdowns, and see you in the next video.